This video was originally just going to be about my first landing. Now, there are videos on YouTube of people who've never flown a real aircraft before. They've only flown simulators. And they get in the plane with an instructor and they absolutely nail their first landing. I looked at these videos with envy and I wanted my first landing to be absolutely perfect. It wasn't.
As we get over the runway, start reducing the power, down runway centre line, close that throttle, nice and gentle, fly straight and level, there we go, easy, 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 easy. Remember, it's just nice and easy on the controls when you're that low down. Let's climb.
It was kind of bumpy, even though I got some last moment assistance from my instructor. Subsequent attempts were something of a mixed bag.
It's nice and easy, just let it come down, start closing the power. Let it come out, and you're around that, fly straight and level. Fly straight and level. Look at the end of the runway. No, don't push. Don't push, do not push, just hold the attitude. Start reducing the power. Start reducing it. Start reducing it, coming down at 65, nice and easy.
Student pilot, to one left.
Easy, easy, easy.
Student Golf Julia Charlie, roger, the windy,
Some turned out better than others.
Now we're high, close that power. Nice and easy.
Maintain represent line at the runway.
There we go, clear, nice, nice. Hey. Amazing.
What I hadn't appreciated before I started learning to fly is how important it is to get everything set up well in advance of actually landing. The touchdown's important, of course, but everything has to be right in the lead up to it before you can even get to the position to put the aircraft on the ground in the first place. So although up to now I've been doing one video for each flying day, this video covers several flying days and is actually about circuits. So this is Stapleford Airfield, orientated north. There are 3 runways, 21 left, 03 right, 21 right, 03 left, and 1028. This is where the planes park up. You taxi along the taxiway here, if you're using runway 21 left, and you line up at the hold here. Here we are in the aircraft lining up at the hold. Now, in reality, you wouldn't taxi direct from the parking spot to the runway. You'd pull off to the side and do your pre-flight checks before that. I'll talk about them in another video. From the hold, you do the necessary checks and radio calls, and then you head to the runway to take off when it's safe to do so. Today, I'm going to talk about taking off, doing a circuit around the airfield, and landing again from the point on the runway where you've done all your pre-takeoff checks, you've done all your radio calls, it's safe to go, and you're ready to start your takeoff roll. The path of the circuit is marked by this yellow line, so we'll spin the view around to see the whole circuit. Here's the airfield, and here's the M25 motorway, which is one of the visual references I'm using. All turns are to the left in this circuit, so you take off and climb out, turn to crosswind leg, turn to downwind leg, turn to base leg, turn to final, and land. Now, as I said, before I started doing circuits, I thought the main challenge was in landing, lining up on the runway, watching your height all the way through, doing the right calls, and making sure that the landing you eventually make is a nice smooth one. The thing is, you can't get to this point without all of these things going right beforehand. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of things to do, and it's definitely not to be used for instruction. I'm still learning to fly myself. It's just my own list of things to think about when I'm flying the circuit. But in amongst all these things in the list is the most important thing, which is fly the plane. Now, it seems obvious, but when I started flying circuits, a lot of my mental capacity was going on remembering the list and checking things off in my head, rather than looking outside, keeping good situational awareness and actually flying the plane. By way of example, I'm flying here on the downwind leg, and I should be maintaining the circuit altitude of 1200 feet all the time. Now, I'm probably at that height for about 2 seconds of the 2 minutes this fast-forwarded bit takes in real time. The instructor's looking outside and making sure everything's safe, but I'm getting caught up in running through checks and not paying enough attention to what's going on outside and my altitude. So quite a lot of learning about circuits for me has been about learning the list to the point that it's second nature. That means that I'm not devoting a lot of mental energy to going through a checklist. I'm devoting my thought and my concentration to looking outside, maintaining situational awareness, keeping eyes and ears on what's going on in the circuit, and actually flying the aircraft and being safe, which is ultimately the point. So, the circuit itself. We start off lining up on the runway.
Centralized controls. runway, matches DI, matches magnetic compass, engine temperatures and pressures in green. Okay, ready to go.
Then you start the takeoff roll, you put the power in progressively, and you get your takeoff roll going.
Full power, maintain runway center line.
A few checks to do during the takeoff roll.
Airspeed is alive, airspeed, temperatures and pressures are in green.
And you're watching for the speed that you rotate at.
50 knots. We'll rotate at 55. Rotate.
Now immediately when you take off, you're not at the best speed to climb, you've just cleared the ground. So you let the airspeed build before you climb out. If you pull back too early and you're not going fast enough, there's a risk that you'll stall.
Let the airspeed come up. 65 knots, climb out 65.
So we're off the ground and we've started to climb, and we're now at the point on the circuit where we have to make a very slight left turn for a noise abatement procedure.
Okay, we're climbing out at 65. Noise abatement turn. Okay.
This is to avoid our flight path going over the airfield's neighbours and upsetting them. So at this point in the circuit, the aircraft is settled into the climb, and it's time to look around and check when is the right point to turn left onto the crosswind leg.
Okay. 900 feet, we're going to make that turn. Okay. Left turn now 115 degrees. Still at 65.
The turn onto crosswind is a climbing turn, and you continue that climb on the crosswind leg until you reach the circuit altitude, in this case 1200 feet. When you're at the right point over the ground and it's safe to do so, you make your left turn. Now when you've made your downwind leg turn, you can start the pre-landing checks. Now I've seen a few different pre-landing check mnemonics on the internet and on YouTube. I'm not saying any of them are wrong or that this is better, this is just the one that I've been taught to use. So when I'm on my downwind leg, going through those checks, making sure that my altitude is constant and my airspeed's under control, keeping a listen out for any traffic in the circuit and a lookout for other aircraft. I'm also looking out to the left to check when my aircraft becomes level with the threshold of the runway I'm going to land on.
Where's my runway? There we are.
And when I get to the point at which I am level, that's the time to radio the airfield and let them know that I am downwind.
Oh, downwind.
Sometimes there's a lot of radio chatter on the circuit and you can't make the call at the point, or you're just busy and you've missed that precise moment. If that happens, then when you make the call to the airfield, you would call late downwind. After calling downwind, I'd complete my checks and then look out for the right time to turn onto base leg. And as always, keep a lookout for other aircraft.
Now we're going to get ready for that turn. Do that in about 10 seconds. He's on fire, isn't he? Okay. Okay, configure for landing car peak, reduce RPM, get down to 60 knots, or 65 knots, safe speed, flap.
As we just saw, I'd configure the aircraft for landing, so reduce the throttle to slow the thing down, and when the airspeed's gone down sufficiently, it's then safe to put the flaps out and start the descent. Now, when on base leg, it's important to keep an eye on final. If you turn onto your base and an aircraft is already on a long final, like this aircraft here, they've got right of way. That might mean slowing down if that's what's needed to keep a safe space between the aircraft and the circuit. The aim is to keep the descent rate correct so that there's a steady, gradual and controlled descent from the circuit onto the level of the runway. When I'm on base and amongst everything else, I'm keeping an eye out for the right point to turn so that when I roll out of my turn, I'm in line with the runway ready for landing. So here we are flying along base and I'm trying to spot the right time to turn so that when I roll out, I'm in line. If you turn too late and overshoot, you've got to correct your course to get back in line with the runway in time for landing. The same obviously applies the other way around if you turn too early and undershoot. In this case, you have to fly at an angle until you capture the runway center line and then line yourself up. The point over the ground that you actually start to make that turn can vary depending on the wind, and so you may have to turn earlier or later depending on the direction and strength of the crosswind. On this circuit, I judged it reasonably well, and so when I rolled out, I was pretty much lined up for final.
Okay. Roll out. Final station flaps. Golf, Golf, Whiskey, final, runway 21 left, touch and go.
When turning onto final, it's vitally important to maintain the correct airspeed. It's really easy to let the speed get too low if you're not paying attention. That's dangerous because you're already flying relatively close to the ground at a slow speed. When you make the turn, you lose even more lift and you can lose more speed, and there's a higher risk that you're going to stall. You haven't got a lot of altitude to recover from the stall should that happen. So in this case, prevention is definitely better than having to cure a stall when you're turning base to final. So now after all that, we're finally ready to try to land the thing. On this approach, I turned base to final a little bit early, so I had to correct for that as we saw earlier. When you're landing, you should be at about 750 feet when you cross this line of pylons. Here I'm a bit low, so I'm looking at the runway position, maintaining 750 feet till I've crossed the pylons, then descending while lining up on the runway. Listening out for traffic, someone's about to come on the radio and say they're overflying at 2,200 feet. I can hear that, but I know they're not going to get in my way.
Charlie, overhead 2,200, tracking to the west.
So now I'm lining up on the runway, I can slow the aircraft down, set full flaps, and radio call that I'm on final.
Final station flaps. Golf Whiskey, final runway 21, left touch and go. Golf Whiskey.
The approach airspeed I'm aiming for is 65 knots.
Out to that runway centre line.
You can see the M25 motorway at the bottom left of the picture.
65 knots.
I'm aiming to be at 450 feet when I cross that road. Now when the airspeed is low, the controls of the aircraft are more sluggish. I'm tending to overcorrect a bit, which is why this isn't a perfectly straight line in. As the runway approaches, the focus is on maintaining the right speed and keeping lined up with the aiming point, which is the numbers painted on the runway. So as I come over the runway, I cut the power and gradually level off, letting the airspeed bleed off as we descend. So landing a bit flat here, but not too bad.
Very nice.
Full power, carb heat off, flaps up and build the speed until we can rotate again.
60 knots, rotate.
So the plan now is to build up experience of circuit flying and landing so that my instructor is happy for me to have a check ride with a senior instructor. If all goes well with that, then hopefully I'll be able to do my first solo.